I'm Aaron Rutten, and today I'm excited to review the DJI OM 5 smartphone stabilizer. This device is known as a gimbal. It can stabilize your smartphone to make the video incredibly smooth, but it also has a few other tricks up its sleeve like motion tracking and panning that I find incredibly useful. I'll be reviewing this device in the context of YouTube video creation. I am a content creator with over 200,000 subscribers and 3 YouTube channels. And this channel is all about helping my fellow creators become more successful. Part of being successful is presenting your content in a professional way. Shaky video can distract from the message of your video, and it may lower the viewer's opinion of your content. While you can enable software stabilization on many smartphones, or apply stabilization in your video editing software, the result is video that is often too cropped, or video that stretches and wobbles in an unnatural way. This is slightly better than shaky video, but it too looks unprofessional. Video shot with a gimbal looks way better than without it. Software stabilization doesn't even come close in comparison. Quick disclaimer, I bought this device with my own money. This is not a sponsored video, and all opinions are my own. Let's start with an overview of the DJI OM 5 and what it can do. The gimbal is motorized with 3 axes of motion. It has a spring tension phone clip that attaches your smartphone to the gimbal with a strong magnet. The clip feels very sturdy, and it's made out of metal. It doesn't seem to interfere with any of the buttons underneath. The clip has a really strong grip when I use it over my phone case. I can already see that it's beginning to warp my case, and I will eventually have to buy a new one. The clip also adds some weight to your phone if you're carrying it around in your pocket. The device is foldable and portable enough to put in your pocket. Is that a gimbal in your pocket, or are you just happy to? It also has a telescopic extension rod. Dude, enough with the phallic jokes. For capturing a wider shot. It features Active Track 4.0. This is an algorithm that can track subjects by moving the camera using the motors. The device is powered by an internal rechargeable battery, which should last about 6 hours under normal use. It takes about 1.5 hours to fully recharge. LED lights on the handle show the battery and device status. It comes with the gimbal, a storage pouch, a wrist strap so you don't break the darn thing, a USB to USB-A power cable for charging the device, a magnetic phone clamp, a manual, and a foldable grip tripod that can also be used to extend the handle. This attaches with a standard tripod screw mount. In order to use most of the features, you will need to install the DJI Mimo app. This is available on iOS and Android, though getting it onto your Android device isn't as straightforward as you might like. You have to download an installer file and then open it from your downloads. If required, you may need to grant access to some permissions for the app to function correctly. This is known as sideloading, and generally speaking, it's not exactly secure to sideload stuff on your phone. My phone recommends that I do not, but I did it anyway. While you don't have to install the Mimo app to use the device, many of the features are only supported in that app. I'll come back to that. At a minimum, you'll need to link the DJI OM 5 to your phone with Bluetooth to use the controls. The stabilization will work whether you choose to connect to Bluetooth or not. However, you won't be able to rotate the phone from portrait to landscape. So long story short, you're going to need to give up some phone permissions to DJI to use this device. Now that the device is linked, let's take a look at how to use the controls. I'll assume you at least read the instructions on the inside of the box, so you know how to unfold the device and attach the clip correctly. There is a power button marked M that you need to hold to power the device on. Once the device is on, make sure your phone is on and either the Mimo app or another camera app is running. Bluetooth will also need to be on and connected to the DJI OM 5. Let's start with the Mimo app. The first thing you may notice is that some of your phone's camera functions may not be available. In my case, I'm using a Samsung S10 Plus, and I am not able to access the shutter, aperture, or ISO like I can in the default camera app. This makes it difficult to control the look of your footage if you're using the Mimo app. As you can see from the current compatibility list, there are fewer limitations for iPhone users, and it varies for Android users depending on the phone model. I can change the recording settings, modify a few preferences, lock the exposure by tapping and holding on a subject, track a subject, zoom, add effects to the video, turn gesture control on and off, switch from front to back cameras, view my recordings, and I can see the status of my battery level for the DJI OM 5 and my phone. This video isn't going to be a tutorial on the Mimo app, but I will demonstrate a few things for you so you can get an idea of what you can do with it. I'll start with the controls and features that are proprietary to the Mimo app, and then I'll show you the universal OM5 controls you can use in any app. The zoom slider will allow you to change the zoom level and switch between lenses on supported cameras. Unfortunately, the zoom movement is really choppy, especially if you customize it to move at the slowest speed. I'm not sure if this is caused by my phone or the DJI OM5, but it makes the zoom useless for creative shots. The rotation button can switch the camera from front to back with a single press, or rotate the camera orientation with a double press. By drawing a box around a subject, you can track it, so long as it doesn't turn away, become obscured, or go out of frame. Tap the X to cancel the tracking. The tracking feature is cool, but it's kind of creepy at first. I believe that being visually tracked in this way is going to become the new normal pretty soon. I can envision little drones and robots scurrying about, capturing your grandmother's 90th birthday from all the best possible angles. Many of us are already comfortable with a security camera display at our local grocery store, but it's a completely different feeling to see an object physically move to track you like a human or animal would. After you get over that, it's really neat, and I can move around the room and record myself as if I have someone filming me. This will only get more sophisticated in time. Unfortunately, the tracking feature is proprietary to the DJI Mimo app, so it will not work in any other app. That's really a bummer. When using the Mimo app, you can initialize tracking and start a recording by making a hand gesture of an open palm or a V. This will allow you to easily record and track yourself from a distance. There are a few interesting and useful shooting modes for creating time lapses and panoramas. These can automatically move the camera to create smooth pans and other creative effects. Again, these are only available in the Mimo app, which is disappointing if you want to be able to use any of the advanced camera settings not available in the Mimo app. While the tracking and a few of the other features are really cool, the recording options in the Mimo app are limited. For example, the front camera can't record beyond 1080p, and the frame rate is capped at 30 frames per second. My camera supports 4K at 60 frames per second on both the front and rear cameras. I believe Mimo's limitations are due to the fact that you have to sideload the app. On iPhones, this is a different story, but if you're buying the DJI OM5 thinking you'll be able to use all the features with your default Samsung camera app, or any other camera app, you're going to be let down. If you want to access advanced camera settings like shutter, aperture, ISO, or a higher frame rate, you will need to use a different camera app. Even without the Mimo app, a Bluetooth connection will allow you to use at least some of the controls on the gimbal in other camera apps. You can pan and tilt with the joystick. I like to invert the controls on mine. If you ever played games like Star Fox, you were either an inverted or uninverted controls kid. It's the same thing here. I like the tilt to be inverted. You can start and stop recordings or take photos. Holding the record button will take burst shots. You can switch the camera orientation by double pressing the rotation button. Pointing the stick at what you want the camera to point at is basically how you use this. The camera will slowly turn to the new viewpoint to keep the video stable. But you can also use the trigger button to lock the view of the camera. Now when you move the stick, the camera turns to continue facing the subject. While holding the trigger, you can also rotate the gimbal and the camera orientation will remain fixed. You can even double tap the trigger button to recenter the gimbal, and tapping the trigger once, then holding it will make the movement of the motors faster and more responsive. Use this to track subjects that move quickly. You cannot use the controls to zoom or switch the camera from front to back in any other app than Mimo. One workaround to the front camera resolution limit in Mimo is to record yourself with the rear camera, but that makes it terribly difficult to do when you can't see yourself. Here's a workaround I've created. If you have installed the Windows Your Phone app on your computer, you can use that to wirelessly control the apps on your phone, including the DJI Mimo app and your default camera. I'm doing this on a desktop, but you could use a laptop as well. Now I can record and track myself with the rear camera in 4K. Or I can use a different camera app and just use the front camera, though tracking isn't possible. And no, you can't open both Mimo and your camera app simultaneously to get the best of both worlds. You can leave the charging cable plugged in and use the device at the same time, which is nice if you plan to use this to vlog from your desk. Now let's wrap up this review with some pros and cons. The first pro is that the price seems reasonable. It feels pretty well built, and the technology is impressive. However, the amount of advertising they offer to replace the OM5 with an insurance plan Makes me think the motors and other complex mechanics in these things can be easily broken. There are insurance plans to replace this device not once, but several times. Better use that wrist strap. The next pro is that the OM 5 really works to stabilize your video. It makes a noticeable difference in the quality of your footage. You will want to disable any software stabilization since it isn't really necessary with a gimbal. Plus, by turning off software stabilization, I can shoot in 60 frames per second in 4K resolution using the Samsung camera app. I'd be limited to 30 frames per second if I kept software stabilization enabled. Shooting in 60 frames per second will make the video even smoother. Here are some examples of footage shot with different combinations of the gimbal and software stabilization. I also like the extension rod. It takes some effort to pull it out, so I'm not worried about it sliding around uncontrollably. There you go again. This allows me to capture wider shots. I'm excited to be able to get vlog-style footage with this device. The final pro is the included stand. It's a neat design. It screws onto the DJI OM 5 just like any ordinary tripod. It can be folded out to set the device down, or you can fold it up and use it to further extend the reach of the gimbal. It's slightly grippy on the bottom, so it won't slide around. And now for some cons. As I mentioned in this review, the biggest cons are the limited camera settings in the Mimo app, and no support for 60 frames per second. That is the case for my Samsung S10 Plus at least. One of the few things keeping me from returning this product is the hope that a patch will be released that will allow the Mimo app to record in full quality and grant access to the shutter, ISO, and other missing camera settings. Forcing people to use the Mimo app in order to access the premium features of the device would be one thing, but recording limitations on top of that is just too much. To be fair, I don't think DJI has much control over this since it's probably Samsung holding things up. But it should be more clear in the product description that this is primarily an iPhone device. The next con is that not only can it be hard to keep your camera pointed where you want it, the tracking can take your footage and smartphone on a wild ride. You have to be part videographer, part carny to master this device. I can only imagine the carnage if you have an external mic and a counterweight mounted to your phone when the gimbal starts going buck wild. There's nothing wrong with the performance of the device, but getting used to holding the device and moving it correctly takes practice. If you do something wrong, it may cause the gimbal to spaz out. Another con is that the wide-angle lens captures the stabilizer arm in the frame unless you zoom in a bit or move your phone off-center. Moving the phone off-center can destabilize your phone, causing warning messages, more battery consumption for the device, and it can make your footage shaky. And my final con is that according to DJI, the device is not water resistant. Because I'm a rebel, I took it outside when the snow was falling. I wasn't out there long enough for it to get wet, and I dried off any moisture. It didn't break the device, but I'm sure it would have had it become wet enough. I don't recommend trying that at home though. It would be cool if the device were water resistant, since many smartphones and cameras are. Overall, I'm part impressed, part disappointed with the DJI OM 5. A lot of what sold me on buying this device turned out to come with limitations. There should be a lot of asterisks on the packaging, indicating that most of the features must be used with the Mimo app. They should also state that the Android app must be side-loaded and cannot be installed via Google Play Store. Aside from that, the device does what it's supposed to do. It stabilizes your smartphone video. And for the most part, I'm happy with that, because all I initially wanted to do was create more professional-looking handheld B-roll and maybe some vlog-style shots. Even the everyday stuff I capture looks a lot better, and it has opened the doors for me to try more creative shots in my productions. That's all for this review. If you enjoyed this video, become a subscriber and enable notifications so you don't miss new reviews like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.